Our first guest is the co-creator of Misspoken, the blog and lady-centric live lit show that happens the last Wednesday of every month at the Gallery Cabaret. The next show is on October 28th, and the theme is sex ed. You can find out more at miss-spoken.com. She's also the former co-producer of Solo in the Second City, holds a 4-1 record at Right Club, and was named Wise Woman of the Week at WBEZ affiliate Vocalo. Before she had a kid, she did cool things like bowl in a league, day drink, sing in a band. But now she spends her time trying to keep babies alive as a mom and as a nanny. Please welcome Carly Oishi. Just a little bit.
Okay, so in 2013, I was the worst dater in Illinois, according to daytime talk show host Steve Harvey. You know, Steve Harvey, who penned the Pulitzer-worthy book, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Steve Harvey, creator of Delightful, a new dating site that helps women become more dateable. For the great many of you who don't know me, I swear I had no idea it was going to go down like this. But I will say that when it was all said and done, I felt like I should, at the very least, be on the short list for such a title. So a producer for the show contacted me after a friend who knew that I was not only single and looking, but also writing a blog and co-hosting a monthly reading series about dating, relationships, and sex, told her about me. When I first spoke with her, she asked if I'd participate in an episode where a small group of women would be given dating advice from a dating coach. Hilarious, right? So after a short phone conversation where I admitted I'd been on at least 50 dates in the past year, she called me back to say they wanted to go in a different direction. She asked if I'd instead like to be featured in a segment about my dating and single life. So going on national TV to talk about my relationship woes sounded completely fine, because I wanted my 60 seconds of fame. And I had no problem airing out my dirty laundry on the internet, so to me this was no different. Besides, I figured my very limited acting experience from high school and college might come in handy. Another producer called me back and asked more specific questions about my background. How many serious relationships had I had? What happened? Why did they end? How did this affect me? Basically, what is wrong with you, and how can we make you look pathetic and desperate? So I effortlessly spilled my story to her as if she were someone I actually knew, or worse, my therapist. The original producer let me know the taping for the show would be happening within days. Then I was told a little more about what was going to happen. They would take me on 2 blind dates that they arranged. And then Steve, I'm on my third wife, Harvey, would analyze them and point out why I was such a dating failure. When I got to the studio, they wanted me to record what was supposed to look like a video that I had submitted from home begging Steve to help me. It was literally called a plea. I was seated on a couch next to an end table with a houseplant on it and handed a pre-written script by the field producer. If only I'd been given a cat to sit in my lap. The gist was that I was a 33-year-old woman whose eggs were drying up on the brink of dying alone, and I nailed it after 3 takes. After hair and makeup, we took a cab to a steak restaurant with a nightclub on the 2nd floor. The first date would be filmed in the restaurant, the second upstairs at the bar to make it seem like 2 different nights. My date and I were kept separated. Finally, they had me put my coat back on and stand at the front door as if I was walking in to meet him. We sat down at a private table for 2. They let the cameras roll for about 20 minutes while we got to know one another. John was a decent-looking white dude with glasses, and we got along pretty well. Suddenly, the field producer yelled, "Cut!" and we were ushered off in 2 directions. The woman producer who had vetted me said, "This isn't how it was supposed to go." I didn't get it. She went on to explain that they thought we wouldn't get along, and the point was that I should like him, but since I obviously don't pick the right guys, would be clearly disinterested. Instead, all they had was footage of us getting along. She asked me to act like I wasn't into him, and I said, I don't know how to do that. So they suggested to take a phone call during the meal. It finally dawned on me that this entire thing was a setup, as if the script and staged home video wasn't enough of a clue. I was the girl with no lines in the high school play with a real-life bad dating history. The perfect candidate for a staged reality TV show bit. So from that moment on, I decided to give them everything they wanted. I gave an Oscar-worthy performance faking the phone call, and John seemed genuinely offended. After 10 more minutes of us chatting, they ended the date. I had hardly touched my food, and then went to tape us individually, asking us how we thought it went. I flippantly expressed my indifference. We said a brief goodbye, and then he was escorted out. So for the next date, I put on a different dress, and the woman producer changed my makeup, and I waited hours for the second date to start. In the meantime, the bartender asked what I'd like from their drink menu. I chose low potion number 9 because I can't make that shit up. Then the scene was set. Since the bar was actually closed, they needed it to look real. They put my producer and an intern in the background and set up candles for atmosphere. Eventually, a guy came up to me sitting at the bar and apologized for being late. I thought Ace, I'm not trying to protect his identity, I just honestly don't remember the guy's name, was pretty cute, and like before, they let the cameras roll without giving us any prompts. When they cut, I was again told this wasn't what they had in mind. Apparently, I looked stiff and unenthused. So they suggested I kiss him, and I muttered, maybe if I were a little drunk, I could work up the nerve. So they poured my martini in a tumbler and suggested I shoot it. And the part-time alcoholic in me happily obliged. 2.5 martinis later on an empty stomach, and I was practically sitting in this dude's lap. The kiss came somewhat naturally, and as we wrapped, I convinced myself we had real chemistry. So before they could take him away, I was able to get his number, and after our separate interviews, my drunk ass was put in a cab, and I immediately sent him a text trying to figure out where he was going. Hours later, I got a vague blow-off reply, and I felt like a complete fool. I wasn't sure I could handle going to the follow-up taping to talk to Steve and go over the footage, but somehow I convinced myself to see it through. Upon arrival for the in-studio taping, I was informed that my show was part of an ongoing segment called United Dates of America, and that I was crowned Illinois' worst. As expected, they edited everything to make me look like a hot mess. The crowd moaned and groaned when I took the phone call and scoffed during the back-to-black clips of me asking about marriage and talking about previous relationships. There were perfect cuts of John making faces at my rude behavior, and of Ace saying things like, I'm not looking for anything serious. Harvey came off looking like a dating genius, chiding me for all of the contrived mistakes I made. The big reveal was to bring John back on and get me to go out with him again. Thankfully, they decided not to have Ace there, and we were immediately taken to a restaurant, this time only filmed for a bit and mostly left to talk without interruption. And again, we got along great and laughed about the whole thing. He offered to drive me home, and we exchanged information saying we should get together. A week or so later, I met him for a couple drinks and thought, this has potential. And to my disillusioned dismay, he skirted my attempts to get together again. In an embarrassing side note, I ran into him a couple of months later when I went to visit my friend who was tending bar, because nothing says single like day drinking on a Sunday by yourself. He walked in with another guy and sat at the other end, so I got up to say hello, and he introduced me to his brother as his television girlfriend. I never heard from him again. I think the saddest part of the whole thing is that even after I realized what a scam the whole thing was, and also understood why all of the women on The Bachelor look like imbalanced lunatics, because who falls in love after 2 dates? I mean, besides me? I still got caught up in what I thought were genuine connections. Or maybe the saddest part was being wasted on daytime TV playing footsie and making out with a guy I just met while my family watched. Actually, it was not knowing an old junior high friend would record it and put it on YouTube.